I'd like to call this session of the Jacksonville Water and Sewer Advisory Committee meeting to order. With that, I hope everybody has gone over the agenda for this evening, and could I have a motion to adopt or amend the agenda, please?
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
Agenda.
I make a motion to accept the agenda as proposed. Agenda. So we have a second?
I'm not going to second it now. Let John do it.
Okay, all those in favor of accepting the agenda for tonight, say aye, please.
Aye.
Thank you. Anybody opposed? I think so. All right, so on to the minutes now. So could I have a motion to accept the
Make a motion to accept.
minutes? Okay, can I have a second for that, please?
I'll second.
Jill, thank you. Any discussion on the minutes from last meeting? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving last month's minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, minutes pass. Onwards to our CIP discussion. Wally.
Good evening.
Good
We
evening.
appreciate everybody being here. Apologize for the rain. Tonight, we're going to talk about the Water and Sewer Capital Improvement Plan. If you remember, in January, we brought to you an update of the FY or fiscal year 20 projects that we are currently working on. Tonight, we're going to talk about the planned water and sewer projects. So that will be those projects that are already identified in our capital improvement plan between FY 21 and FY 29. And then in March, we'll review any proposed new projects and any changes that we're proposing to the projects that we're reviewing tonight. And basically, this is similar to the format we followed last year. So we'll go through the ongoing funded projects, which is what we did at the last meeting, and then those projects that we've previously identified, and then the projects that we're proposing or any modifications that we're looking at. And then we'll be looking, if you're comfortable in March, we can move forward with a recommendation then. If not, we can always look at that again in April and look at the full document if we need to. So just a quick reminder, the capital improvement plan is a 10-year document. We went to a 10-year document because of the system development fee legislation saying that we had to have at least a 10-year planning window in our capital improvement plans for water and sewer projects. The capital improvement plan shows project cost. It identifies funding sources, and it evaluates and prioritizes projects. Projects in the capital improvement plan are projects that typically are greater than $50,000. They have a useful life of more than 5 years, and it typically takes more than 12 months to go through the entire process. So that would include planning, design, and it would include construction. Projects that fall in the water and sewer capital improvement plan are really two types of projects. They're either rehab or rehabilitation projects, or they're growth-related projects. So rehab projects would be, existing infrastructure that needs replacement or major repair, above normal maintenance. And then growth-related projects is typically, water sewer line extensions to serve new areas, new pump stations, or upgrades. So we take an existing pump station that serves an area, and when we replace it, we upgrade it so that it has additional capacity. So those typically fall in those growth-related projects. So tonight, as you're going through these and you're thinking about where these projects came from, the dots on the map aren't really there for you to specifically read them, but what they represent is maintenance that utilities maintenance has done in the last year. So this is only the maintenance activities for sewer that they've done in the last year. And as you can see there, we have those broken up between service and then mains. The top 3 are service, the bottom 2 are mains. And the total is around 284 sewer-related items. That doesn't include our lift stations. That's just what we've done on mains or services. Combine that with our water repairs, you'll notice that we're closer to 645 or 650 repairs, most of those being water services. So those are leaks that are called in, and they happen to be between the main that's in the street and the person's water meter. That doesn't include the calls that we go to that are behind the water meter on the customer's side. So those calls are handled by the customer. So these are repairs that we have made to our system. So you can see that we have significant repairs to both of our water and sewer system. Some of that is due to the age of the system in certain areas. Some of that is due to the material in certain areas. And some of it is a result of activities like construction or something like that. So that takes care of really our rehabilitation. That's how we make decisions on what infrastructure we need to replace or spend significant money repairing, or where we need to focus I&I efforts, that inflow and infiltration that we talk about all the time. On the growth side, we have planning documents where we look at our different basins and the growth that those basins could potentially see in the next, we typically look at about a 20-year range. So this is the Henderson Basin. If you'll recall, Greg came to you probably about a year and a half ago now and gave you a presentation on the state of our sewer system. And this is one of those slides from our sewer system. So this shows the Henderson Basin. You know, it shows that we do have I&I challenges in this basin, but this basin is still developing out. So we have 330 acres of undeveloped or vacant land that we've identified within the basin and within city limits. And we also have 680 acres that is just outside of city limits, is in the city's ETJ, but is also undeveloped. But if that land were developed, it would come through this basin. Compare that to the Brookview Basin. So these are really the two major growth areas that we see. So we're primarily talking about that Western Boulevard corridor. So in the Brookview Basin, again, we have I&I challenges, but we have 790 acres of undeveloped land already in city limit and 850 acres of undeveloped land that is in the city's ETJ or just outside of city limits. And the potential flow through that basin is 1.1 million gallons based on the undeveloped area. So this is the type, and we have this for other basins also. So this is the type of information we use as we are trying to project growth-related projects. We couple this with meetings that we have with parties that are interested in developing. We know for a fact that Mr. Sides is working on the Cypress Creek track, which is this track right off Gum Branch and Western. And he's looking at, right now, several hundred single-family homes. We have also talked, if I go back one slide, to Mr. Tootin and Mr. Baker, who are looking at those two tracks. So we know that they are actually actively planning and designing those projects. So those are on the near horizon. So as we're moving through the projects, there's a bunch of projects. You'll have a document at your place that looks like this. And Hopefully I've got these in the right order to where we can just move through them, but I do have the page numbers if you need them. And this is kind of what you're going to see on the slides as we move through the project. So the green simply represents sewer, blue water, and then the purple represents combined water and sewer projects. And then you can see there's kind of a little Gantt chart to the right of that, and that shows planning, design, and construction. And because we haven't started any of these projects, there's really no graphical representation that we can give you of where we are in the process, planning, design, or construction, because we haven't started. It's outside of our funding window. We didn't have any money to begin that project. So what we've done is show you the year that we anticipate based on the current CIP of when that element of the project would start. And you'll see that some of them will be blank. We don't have any planning. We'll move right into design because that planning was probably taken care of as part of a larger master plan, saying this is what we need. Then it's just designing that element. So, and then if you see multiple years, for example, in construction, that just means that the construction is likely going to span more than one fiscal year. You know, it may start at the end of a fiscal year and roll into the next fiscal year, or it just may be a large project that will take multiple fiscal years to complete. So with that, we'll just jump right in. We will be starting on page 4 at the Biofilter Upgrades. This project is a project that we've discussed before, if you'll remember. We had a project that had biofilter upgrades for Ellis Pump Station and Bryn Mawr. And we actually conducted a study, and what the study said is that both of the biofilters at those two stations were undersized for the amount of flow that those stations currently handle. The wet wells were not getting sufficient air swap, and hydrogen sulfide gas was building up in those, and the station was beginning to show deterioration because of that. It eats at the concrete. It really does a number on our electrical components. So this is one of those projects that we really needed to move forward. We had, after Hurricane Florence, and we had to give so much attention to Ellis, we actually broke these two projects out separately. We just took the money and split it between the two projects. And this board actually asked, well, is this one that we can afford to slip out one year, which is the decision we made. And we told you that we could, and we stand beside that, but it's at a time now where we really need to move forward with this project. Western Trunk Sewer Phase 2 is actually the downstream, that's on page 5. It's actually the downstream sewer that would follow behind the Western Regional Pump Station and Trunk Sewer, which, by the way, we plan to talk with City Council about that project at their first meeting in March, hopefully the March 7th meeting. Mr. Thomas, does that sound right? March 7th. So we will be at the first council meeting in March to talk about the Western Regional Trunk Sewer and Pump Station project. But this is the second phase of that. So this would pick up between Carolina Forest and Marine Boulevard so that we could divert all of that flow that's currently coming from the Commons and the commercial area right there at Walmart and Chuck E. Cheese and Golden Corral, and divert that flow through this system. That will relieve significant pressure off of Henderson Drive. So obviously we will be looking at the year of this. It is not currently designed. It was planned as part of the overall project, but this is one of those projects that will lag behind that initial project. So as we're talking to City Council, this is a project that we will have to schedule accordingly. So I could see this project potentially moving in the upcoming CIP, and we should have a good idea of that before your next meeting. The Effluent Transfer Pump Station is actually a pump station at LTS. Right now, The only way we can get water into the South Lagoon is through gravity. It actually comes into a weir box, and they adjust those weirs, the gates, to send water to the South Lagoon or to the West Lagoon. And if you recall, the West Lagoon is what we actually pump out of. So if we're diverting water to the South Lagoon, the only way we can get it back out is to adjust that weir and move it by gravity from the south to the west. This is a recommendation that came out of a panel that evaluated operations at the land treatment site. And this is one that staff has been looking at. We may look at adjusting this project as well. And then Poplar Branch Pump Station number 2 and sewer is a pump station that in the future would be associated with development behind Patriot Park. So if you remember, the city partnered with ONWASA to construct a pump station and new sewer along Piney Green Road in advance, or in conjunction with actually, of the Piney Green Road widening project. This station is the next piece of this. Unfortunately, we really haven't seen development in that area. So, you know, if we don't have the development pressure right now on that Poplar Branch pump station that we already have in place, you know, this is one of those projects we really need to evaluate. Do we leave it here, or can we potentially look at moving it out further in the window also? Continuing with sewer, I know that this is one of those projects that you have seen many times before. This is actually a program. So I'm going to talk about all of these projects all at once. So these will be pages 8 through 12 in your capital improvement plan. This is an ongoing inflow and infiltration. Our goal here is to eliminate rainwater, stormwater, and groundwater from getting into our sewer system. It takes up capacity in our sewer system. It adds to the treatment level at the land treatment site. So that's additional wastewater that we have to treat that it was not used by our citizens. It just got into our system. And it takes away capacity. So this is our ongoing program. We've called this our Find and Fix program. So we've gone to a 2-year cycle. So the first year that you see, the FY21, where you see design dollars, and then construction in FY22. In that FY21, what we'll do is go out and use a video camera specific areas of our system and look for problems. Once we identify those problems, then we'll come back the next year and actually work on fixing those problems. So it gives us time to pull together data, put a viable project together, and then bring a contractor in and bid out one larger project.
2 questions. So right now, for each set of years, first question is, you don't have specific regions of the city set up yet, right?
Correct.
Okay. The other is, second part of that is, as you go around looking for things, there's still the possibility that you might find something that you say, okay, we got to fix this now.
Exactly.
So what would that come in-house out of existing funds to do that?
If it's something that we find that we have to fix immediately, it's actually done through Anthony's operating budget. And if it's not something that he can handle in-house, typically his crews can go to about 5 feet. Much deeper than that really starts causing challenges. You have to have special equipment, larger work areas. And what we've found right now is, not that we don't have the expertise in-house, because we do, but just for the sheer size and scope and equipment that you need, we typically contract that out. And he does it through emergency funds. But that is all built into his regular operating budget.
Okay, thank you.
And if you'll remember, several years ago, we had the Big Dig, I guess it was called.
Corbin.
At Marsh Oaks off of Corbin. And, that sewer was over 20 feet deep. And if you remember, Pete's budget at the time really took a major hit on. That one was over $200,000. So you never know what you're gonna find.
Two questions really. One is, do we have some measurement of success of this particular program? And the complementary question to that is, are we going to be able to see a reduction in the cost? You know, we've got out $700,000 every time you put this out. Are we going to either have it go, instead of every 2 years, every 3 years, or have that cost of $700 come down because we have measurements of success that indicate we're getting on top of this problem?
We have not, when we started this program, we did measurements of success. And it took quite a bit of money to do that because you had to have an engineer go behind everything that was fixed and quantify it. The challenge with actually seeing it at the plant is as you're reducing what's coming into the system, you're also adding growth into it. So what we've found is if we watch what we're allocating, which we are required to monitor every gallon that we give out. So every gallon of sewer that we give out, we track, and we call that paper flow. So it's not really flow coming into the system, but it's flow we have committed to somebody. So it's obligated. We can't give it you can't give it out twice. So we track it. And then once that flow actually comes into the system, we can remove that paper flow because it's coming into the system. Well, what we found is there is some level of difference between paper flow and actual flow because of design requirements. But what we found is when we were doing this project and actually monitoring the flow and quantified it, I think what we quantified in the first project we did was like 475,000 gallons that we eliminated. And what we found is that as we tracked our paper flow, we could actually see that because our growth, we saw more growth than that, even in actual flow, and our average flow at the LTS did not increase to what we would have expected. Does that make sense? No. But in order to actually quantify it, it's a significant cost. So what we've done, and we had to do that because of the special order by consent with the state at the time. So it was something that we had to physically prove to them in order to have that flow to give out. And since then, we haven't wanted to spend the money because we can see where we're eliminating inflow and infiltration. You can see it through our lift stations. You know, the flows don't spike as quickly. So we can see that, so we haven't wanted to spend the money to come back and quantify and say, oh, we actually eliminated this number of gallons. Because right now we're not under that special order by consent. So while we want to continue to do this, there's no requirement saying we have to do this.
But seeing it through the lift stations is important.
It is.
That is one way of saying, okay, this is a 1-inch rain, this is what our lift station used to do, but now we can have that 1-inch rain and that
it doesn't
difference.
Spike as quickly.
Yeah.
And the other that we see is we also watch the flow meter at Land App, and sometimes some of that is, where you can see a difference is how long does that elevated flow stay high? So and Jill can help me explain this because she watched that flow meter for a long time. But after a rain, so rain comes in and we get this influx of water into our system. Well, it has to go to LTS. And after that rainfall, you still have elevated flow, but it's how quickly does the system start to recover back to that normal level. And as we do these projects, what you can see is that we start recovering quicker. Instead of staying at an elevated flow for 5 days, it may be 4 days or 3 days or something like that.
A couple hours.
Yes.
It's really improved a lot over the past 10 years.
That's good.
Yeah.
So while we don't go track gallon, but we do see the difference.
Well, what my concern is, I remember when we started talking about I&I, and there was a significant problem that was easily felt.
Right.
And we've been putting a consistent amount of money into this problem. I'm wondering, are we going to see a point when, well, we'll never eliminate,
right,
but we can put less money into this problem? And if you tell me that we can't, or we don't know we're doing that, then the question is, comes to mind is, are we putting enough in at the $700,000 each year to get ahead of the problem? So the reason I asked the question again is, I don't care how you measure it, but are we going to have to do $700,000 forever because we're too lazy to figure out that we're ahead of the project or that we're not making any progress at all?
I think that you may not have to do it I think you'll have to put money into it forever because your infrastructure is going to continue to age.
Right. That would make
So-
sense to me that it's gonna be what you're fixing today, is taking giving time for something else to
That's right.
generate, to need the fix.
So, and if you think about it, even, we think of the commons area, right? Some of that area is now 20 years old. You look at Carolina Forest, I think the first house went in 2003 or 4. So even what we consider our new infrastructure
It's getting older.
is getting older. So we're still addressing older areas of town. We're really focused right now the one that we're doing this year is the Triangle Basin where they removed the mobile home park. And one of the other ones we're really looking at is the Decatur Basin, because we found when we did flow monitoring in that basin for the Decatur lift station, we realized that the flow was higher there than it should be for a built-out basin. So that's another area we're looking. So while I'm not saying we'll have to do $700,000 forever, but it's going to be a reoccurring program. And it's what may get more difficult is how you find things. So, and hopefully the materials we're using now are better than the materials we used 40 and 50 years ago.
Okay, well, at the expense of appearing to beat a dead horse at this point, my thoughts are it's either one of three things. One is we've got just the right amount budgeted every time we do this, that it's going to be that amount forever because we're right on the head. I'm suspicious of that option. The other option is that we're putting enough into this that someday we'll be able to do less and still stay ahead of the project. And the other is what we discussed when we first started this. Put enough in early so you get ahead of this. So again, are we putting in enough now, $700,000 to get ahead of it, or are we putting enough in that in 5 years we can do $500,000? And that's why I asked the question, is being a good steward of the money. If you need to get ahead of it, let's put a little more money into this in the next 3 years. Or if we're getting ahead of it, then let's show that in 5 years we can put a little less money into it.
You're right, we did do that, but with the first 2 projects that we did, we put like $3 million into it. So the $700,000 really came out of where we felt we could balance the project with, using staff, using our resource, and having that reoccurring program, and having a viable project. So it was not as much of, we did try to catch up early with the first 2 or 3 projects that we did. I mean, we did whole basin studies, and I think the first project was almost $3 million. And that one was in 2007 or 8. But when we got through, and I think the second project was about $1.5 million. So as we got through those, we realized those were large projects. They took quite a bit longer to put together. And what we found is that as we were pulling those projects together, you actually narrow the amount of contractors that can handle projects of that size. So we're really looking for that sweet spot of a reoccurring program. We're still making progress and trying to balance that with workload and with the money, which is how we got to that number.
I suspect the board would support if you needed more money, we would, tell the council. We think that. On the other hand, looking after our citizens, we will probably in the future ask you if you could reduce that $700,000 somewhat if we are consistently doing what you're describing.
I agree.
Yeah, we'll be interested in what you start seeing out there.
And then I know we've seen this a couple times, but if you're interested, I did bring what this program does. So you've got the original pipe is in green, and they basically, for lack of a better term, a sock. They roll it inside out through a manhole down the pipe, and then they fill it with hot water or steam, and it cures, and you can see it's not quite as thick, but almost as thick as the original pipe. So really, it's a pipe inside of a pipe.
So it's almost like putting on a cast,
Exactly.
where they put that on, then they get it all nice and wet and
That's right.
the whole thing.
That's right.
Does it get warm and bond to it the same way?
It does. It actually gets really hot. So if you have any interest, we have this for you.
Thank you.
So continuing on, we'll move to water. So the first project is FY21 water line replacement. It's on page 14. And this is various short segments of water lines, mostly down courts and a few connector roads. And what we've looked at is these are streets that we were consistently seeing problems, but these streets predate Mobile 311. So what we have not had time to do yet is to go back and look at these streets and compare them to the data that we've been gathering over the last year to 18 months, I guess, of information in Mobile 311 to verify that these are continuing to be a problem. So we may come back and adjust the actual street names or water lines in this list, but we will be moving forward with some sort of water line replacement project. The Commerce and Memorial water line is one of those that has been in your CIP for several years now. It is one that does need to be done. And it is replacing water line along Memorial and replacing line along Commerce Drive. But in the line that we'd be replacing along Commerce Drive, we would actually increase that, I think, from an 8 to a 12. And the reason for that is so that we can connect all the way over to Piney Green Road in the future, because we do have water line at North Marine Town Shopping Center.
Is this going to happen at the same time that the road goes through?
No, we will follow behind that. But with the DOT project, what we did was planned ahead for that water line to be outside of the roadway. So it'll be behind the shoulder, which is, DOT likes that, and it makes it easier for us to maintain in the future. And then the Castle Hayne water supply wells. This is additional wells from the Castle Hayne to send to our water treatment plant. These wells would give us, while they would give us additional capacity, it also allows us to better manage our aquifer. This is a project that we'll be talking with Joe more on to determine what we need to do here and determine whether, you know, we've got the sufficient number of wells or whether we need to adjust that timeline. If you'll recall, one of the things that we're currently working on is monitoring wells through a grant in the Hubert area and in the Burton Park area. And in the Hubert area, we're trying to, again, find that freshwater, saltwater interface. In the Burton Park area, we're actually looking at the Castle Hayne aquifer specifically. And the reason for that is when we were drilling the monitoring wells for the Black Creek at that location, when we went through the Castle Hayne aquifer, it was over 200 feet wide. So Dr. Sproul at the time noted that and said, you know, if you're looking for a production well, you need to be looking in this zone. And ironically, if you look on a map as the crow flies, it's almost in a straight line with our Deerfield well, which is our best producer, by far our best producer. It produces double what most of our other wells produce. So strategically locating these wells could help us reduce the number that we need. So this is a project that we'll be looking at closer.
How does the possible state letting up on the black reductions affect this?
We are working, we have we had to take the last reduction, but we have submitted the initial information for a modified permit to increase our capacity back up. They'll only let us increase it a certain amount, and that amount is based on what you use. So where we're at now is one piece of information that we're working on is well diagrams for every well. So if you remember, we implemented a project to go pull our Black Creek wells and have them cameraed or videoed to look at the condition that they were in and to measure the pump intake level. And that's the specific information that we need because we didn't have those records from the 60s and 70s. And the project is finished, so we have all of the information, but we have to develop the well diagrams. And the funny thing is, I think I was talking to Jason earlier this week about, is this something that we can develop in-house based on the information that the well driller provided? And he's going to start that internally in the next week or so.
So are we currently 75% Castlehane, 25% Black Creek?
We're roughly a little over that for Castlehane. It's 1 million to 1.5 of Black Creek a day, and give or take three to half to of Castlehane. But we're only permitted for I think 750,000 gallons. So we're running over, which is not a bad thing because we have a bank account of water, a water bank. And what they've basically told us is if we were to switch, so we're not running over before we submit you can only submit the modified permit for what you need. So if we start using less, we won't be able to get a modified permit.
In other words, you have to be overdrawn to get the benefit. Okay.
I will say that I personally had a problem with that in the meeting, and John was there. I was like, what you're doing is forcing us to use more to say we need it. So I really struggled with that one. So, but we're currently, and that's how we've been operating for like the last at least 3 years. So. And again, what we've seen, recovery levels in the Black Creek are impressive. They cannot argue at all that the water level is recovering.
Well, if we can use more Black Creek water, which is less expensive to use,
Yes.
then we would not need as extensive the Castlehane
That is correct.
water supply wells effort.
And it puts less pressure on the Castlehane, which the base is solely in the Castlehane. And they would have problems in the Castlehane before we would. So there's a fine balance that we are trying to work around there.
Thank you.
The Sandy and Lakewood water lines, this is similar to the FY21 water line replacement that we discussed. It's water lines that we've had issues in the past. What I will say is is Lakewood in the Branchwood area? Let me know.
I believe so.
So we will be bringing you a new project to look at, or possibly a revision to this project to look at in the near future, because in the Branchwood area, Anthony has gone through and replaced over 60 water services in the last year alone. We have failures there all the time. So we're looking at a project and you could see it on the map. I mean, it's clear as day. So we'll bring that's one project we'll be bringing for you at your next meeting for consideration. And we would, we'll be recommending that project move forward possibly ahead of some of the others. And then the Drummer Calum water line is a water line extension. It would go out the back of the commons over to Drummer Calum Road, all the way down to 17 and tie in your Pine Green to existing water line that we already have. The reason for that is one, to improve the water system quality in that area, because that is a long dead end line. We have to blow it off periodically. And it would improve pressure and fire flow in that area. So that is one. It is primarily development driven. So again, trying to gauge, with the development that we do see in that area.
What do you anticipate the line being, 8?
12.
12.
I guess. I didn't read somebody look at the project that's got it open, but I'm pretty sure it's a 12.
Yes.
Yep.
Subject to change as all these are.
And then the US 17 Halltown Road extension. This is a water line that would go out 17 north if we were to see development in that area. This is based on a master plan that we were reviewing. Although what I will say is that if you'll notice in the write-up, it talks about there may be the possibility of an agreement with Onwasa that could be reached for this area if we see development. So if they already have existing infrastructure, there may not be the need to extend our infrastructure into that area. And then the well rehabilitation projects. These projects are, again, this is a reoccurring project. We have somewhere around 35 well houses. These 4 projects are really to continue addressing well houses that were constructed in the 60s and 70s. So these projects would not look at any of our newer wells in the Castle Hayne. And right now, just to give you an idea, the oldest wells in the Castle Hayne, the first 8 wells that we drilled in the Castle Hayne were all drilled in right around the 2000 mark. So those wells are now 20 years old. So we actually drilled those long before we built the plant. And I don't know if you remember, but we did some water, I'm sure Jill will, because she took the calls, but we did some water blending, and the odor and the taste just wasn't there for what our citizens were used to. So we had to back off of those. And actually, I stand corrected, those may be in the 2003 timeframe. So it kind of blurs together after a while. So again, those first 4 projects are to address the wells that were constructed in the 60s and 70s. Moving to water and sewer, so these are our combined projects. The vehicle wash facility is not really infrastructure related. That facility is needed to continue the maintenance and care of our existing motor fleet and equipment. And the portion of the water and sewer funds you see are really to pay for the portion, our share of the fleet cost. So it would be, it's appropriated out based on the amount of vehicles and equipment that we have. And then the Saunders School and Thompson water and sewer repairs. These are water and sewer repairs that we've identified that need to be made. You can see that the design is to begin in 21 for this project, but that's probably one of those that we'll probably do a little bit of preliminary design work to look at and see, one of the things that you may recall that we like to do, especially on these combined projects, is look at the sewer system and see, is it really necessary to go out, dig it up and replace it? Or is it something that we can handle through similar treatment methods as the I&I projects, cured in place lining, point repairs, manhole coatings or manhole rehabilitation. So we will do a little bit more before we move forward with this project to see what we need to do in those areas. And then Old Bridge and Court Street, you can see that those projects are in, again, those are much larger than just water and sewer projects. They're similar to Newbridge Street, where we do have older existing infrastructure that we do have challenges with. And will need to be addressed, and there's some need to do not only street, but some streetscape upgrades in those areas as well. And then the last, actually 6 projects in your binder are the NCDOT projects. Right now, we kind of currently have all of those on hold. If you'll recall, NCDOT ran into some widely published funding challenges. Although I did come from a meeting today that said all of their projects that were on hold should be released by May of this year. So those projects may not be on hold for much longer. And we did talk to them about schedules for these projects to make sure that what we have identified in the capital improvement plan for these projects does correspond with their new project schedules. So if these adjust, they'll be, again, driven by NCDOT and what their project schedule looks like. So that's really all of the projects that we have in the current CIP. We have 25 total projects, 10 sewer. Actually, I think it's 9 sewer. I may be off a little bit there, but 9 sewer, 10 water, and we have five combined water and sewer projects.
Well, in the past, we talked about the southwest area, and we talked about going down Gum Branch. But with the economy doing better, there's some talk in different corners of 17 going New Bern, having some development within this window. Will this CIP prepare us if there's an explosion of growth down 17 and they want to have Jacksonville incorporate that area into the city?
The projects that would be necessary for that are included in the CIP.
Okay.
You know, they're further out in the out years because we really haven't seen that development pressure begin yet. And we really wouldn't move that forward until we started to see that development pressure. Where we're really seeing the development pressure right now is along that western corridor. You know, that it's obvious with the new Publix and Blaze Pizza and, you know, that shopping center, and then the interest that we've had in single family homes, both at the old Vineyards or Cypress Creek tract and at the right off of Ramsey Road near Carolina Forest. And those are also included in the CIP.
And anything that would go down 17 while included in this would be paid for by the hookup fees that people would have to pay.
Yes. So if we, you know, as we talked about the identifying funding sources, and we talked about really the 2 different types of projects, the rehabilitation project or the growth projects, anything identified growth related, even if it's only a portion of a project, is covered through our system development fee. And it is built into our system development fee model. If it's straight repair or replacement because of deteriorating infrastructure or collapses or whatever that we, you know, I that we need to address, that's covered in our rate.
So you don't see any pressure financially that would move the rates because of this CIP?
We haven't run well, we do have new projects that we'll be proposing, and we do have projects that we'll be proposing to move out. And we will be looking at those models before we come back to you with a full recommendation.
And that'll be coupled with those that are completed, the bonds that are being retired, for example.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And last, just a reminder of the schedule. Tonight we're at the 21 through 29 discussion of existing projects. At your next meeting, we'll have those new projects proposed and the revisions, and we'll be looking at some sort of support from you in March or April. Conservatively April, but if we give you enough information, you're ready to move forward in March, we can do it
if I can make a comment, just in general. I have worked with a couple other cities here in the last year. Jacksonville is way ahead on a capital plan and taking into consideration what's needed and keeping things in an orderly manner that doesn't make rates go up because things have got to get done. So sometimes we forget how well we're doing in that area because we're inside the circle and not looking, you know, from the outside. And I have to say, having seen several other cities, Jacksonville is doing quite well as far as taking care of the system they have and being prepared for the future.
We appreciate that.
Anybody else have any other comments or questions for Wally? Okay, any old business, Wally?
I don't have anything in business.
Any new business?
I do have a couple of things in new business. So we have a couple of maintenance activities going on with our elevated storage tank. Northwoods and Ellis, we have some exterior renovations. The last time this was done was in 2011. The tanks will be online because all of the work is exterior. There will be painting and putting Jacksonville back up on these tanks. And then the next interior scheduled for either of these tanks is in 2025. So as you see work going on in Northwoods and Ellis, that's what we're actually, our contractors painting those tanks.
Is this that contract that we did a number of years ago where turned everything over to them and they're doing it on their schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
And we currently, on our elevated storage tanks, I think we have all but 2 on there. And then the other, I apologize for the dark picture, but it's literally like a cave, is our Gum Branch Central. This is a below ground clear well, holds 500,000 gallons, I believe. And we've completed the washout and analysis. We did find a few, it's concrete, so we did find a few concrete cracks that we have to deal with. And currently what they're doing is putting on a coating for that inside of that tank. So this picture is actually taken from inside the tank, and you can see that in the right-hand side of the picture, it looks like a wall. The tank actually has baffles in it. So that's part of the baffle system. And this is a 4 to 6 week project. We expect this project to wrap up in
somewhere in the middle of March.
Middle of March. So the tank is currently offline right now.
But they're still able to, is that part of their water storage? You mentioned it's a clear well.
It's part of the water storage. This is what supplies Gum Branch Central.
So, but there's still no water pressure concerns or anything along those lines?
Correct.
Okay.
And then a bit of good news, council is considering a lease revision with AT&T. This will be for 6 posts at the Northwoods Tank, $1,000 a post per month. So you can see that in the first year, our revenue is about $72,000. The lease is a 7-year lease, and it's just over $500,000 total value of the contract. So
We've been doing
good
this,
news.
We've been doing this for a while. Has there been any issues with the storage tanks having those things bolted onto?
No, the only because what we do is as they add infrastructure to those tanks, they have to get it approved not only through us, but through our tank maintenance contractor. So any repairs or anything that has to be done, our tank maintenance contractor takes care of it, make sure that it's done. That said, we do have to make some repairs inside of the commons tank. That's going to be a challenge because to do it, we've got to take it offline.
Mm-hmm.
And we are currently trying to figure out how we would accomplish that.
What's going on?
That does present a challenge.
Yeah, what's going on with that one?
Right now, we're still using it.
No, but what's going on inside of it?
It came from work that was done at the tank several years ago, and they noted that we were going to have to come back and coat it inside. And the problem is to coat it. The coating has a minimum cure time before you can put water back in it. And I don't remember the length, was it 6 weeks or something?
6 weeks.
So we would have to figure out how to live without the commons tank for 6 weeks, which, would be a challenge.
So there's not a secondary tank or anything that rerouting to get them?
The real challenge is there's only 2 tanks on our high side, the commons tank and the Bryn Mawr tank. And currently, if we put the Bryn Mawr tank online, the commons literally pushes water out the top of it because of pressure. So we are evaluating, and you may see a project in your capital improvement plan to remedy that. John wants to raise it.
Raise the Bryn Mawr one?
Yes.
Ah.
But it is a 400,000 gallon tank that we cannot use. Now it's used for cellular leases, so we're not losing anything on it, but it's 400,000 gallons of storage that we have available that we can't use because we can't get water out of it. To get water out of it, you have to significantly drop the pressure in the system.
So would you be using it when the commons tank went offline?
And well,
And what would you have to do to make it ready to be used again?
That's the question, is what can we do? What can we do to address that issue that allows us to use it to take the commons tank offline?
So
And that's
does it
what
have
we're
to be
currently
resealed
looking at.
first before you do the other one?
Yes. There's really 2 options. Raise it, which they do, they do make extensions that you could raise it. John found companies that do that. So that is an alternative, and the other is a booster station. So you valve it and put a booster station there.
For the pressure?
For the pressure, yes.
Going back to the issue of a tank that would have to be offline for 6 weeks or longer, the work plus the curing time. Is there any thought to coming up with contingencies for significant damage to a water tank? Let's say, I don't know, hurricane, lightning strike, American terrorists, flying a drone into it, I don't know. But if one of those tanks was to be taken offline and it wasn't in an orderly manner, have we considered having some sort of contingency plans that says we might need backup?
We would be in good shape on our low side. The commons is really our largest challenge.
You'd be figuring out how to put the Bryn Mawr one online a whole lot faster.
That's right.
Okay.
So, but that said, we have looked at it because there is difference in pressure from the commons tank, which we call the high side. So we're around 65 PSI on our high side, and what is on the low side. So anybody that lives in the Northwoods area, downtown, all the way out the Yop Road is on the low side of the system, Hargett Street.
What's their pressure?
And their pressure is 48 to 50.
Yeah, 40 to 50.
So it ranges from 40 to 50. So there is a significant difference there. Before Greg left, we looked at a water master plan to see what we would need to do. And what we actually identified, because we were having significant pressure issues in the Yop Road area, what we've identified, if we constructed one additional tank that mirrored the commons somewhere in the Triangle Yop Road area, you could take all of our existing tanks offline and just run those 2 and have consistent pressure zone across the city. So that is a project that you will also see in the upcoming CIP. Now it'll probably be way out in the window, but that is one that you will see. So we can have more discussions on that. And that was preliminary, that was very preliminary engineering. So he used he used our existing model, but there were quite a few assumptions that he had to build into that.
Understanding that might be several years out, would not have, unless we had a crisis, would be necessary. Maybe the planning should be done earlier and then put on the shelf in case we do have a hurricane or a drone flying into a...
I don't disagree. So, that's all I have for new business. The only other thing I would like to say, Derek and I were talking, and we wanted to see what you think about, instead of having old business and new business, which we very rarely have old business, just changing on our agenda to something similar to open discussion or something like that. Any issues with that?
I make a motion that we change the agenda and put open discussion and vice old business in future meetings. That's a motion.
Old and new
Yes.
discussions, upcoming thoughts, whatever,
Okay.
something that kind of blends it all together. So with that, I saw the next meeting dates up there. So our next one is Thursday, March 12th, 5:30. And if there's nothing else, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Can I have a second?
I was going to get that
You've been waiting all night for that one.
I was going to get that indeed.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.